and welcome to Next Gen Finance. My name is Lina Apsheva and I'm an analyst in sustainable finance at SEB. And today I invite you to join me for a conversation around finance and gender equality. While sustainability discussions often focus on the environment, social questions are a part of the sustainability agenda that is just as important to raise. And today, to help us understand how we can address these questions through investments, I'll first talk to the head of sustainability at Commune Invest, Björn Bergstrand, and then to my colleagues from SEB Investment Management, Hanna, Holmberg, and Camilla, Löwenhielm, who work with microfinance. I should also mention that we will have 2 episodes on this topic, and this is of course part 1, and in part 2 we will look at this question from a slightly different perspective. But now let's hear what Björn can tell us about how Commune Invest works with this topic. Hi Björn, thank you so much for joining me today in the studio and agreeing to answer some questions about Commune Invest and your work with gender equality. But before we jump into the more detailed questions, I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about what Commune Invest even is, because I think some of our audience might not know and would love to know.
Well, first of all, Lina, thank you very much for inviting me to this podcast. Very glad to be here. So Commune Invest is a credit institution owned by the Swedish local governments. They are 310 in total, and nearly all of them are members of Commune Invest, 294 members we have currently. The core idea of Commune Invest is to provide stable and cost-efficient funding for the infrastructure investment needs of the Swedish local governments. And they have a very broad mandate. They are responsible for everything from healthcare to schooling, preschooling, energy supply, local public transport, etc. So they have very big investment needs. And Commune Invest was established some 30 years ago as a response, actually, to a perceived lack of competition in the financing market for local governments. So essentially, the local governments felt that they were paying too much to borrow money in the market and decided to establish their own credit institution. We have currently approximately a 60% market share, so we are by far the largest lender to the local governments.
Could you elaborate a little bit more about how exactly Commune Invest provides funding for the communes in Sweden?
We are solely getting access to our funds through the market. We do not take deposits, so we are active on national and international capital markets, effectively solely through bond issuance. We typically issue benchmark bonds in Swedish krona, in US dollars, and now recently we've also started with euros. Our investor base is primarily institutional investors looking for AAA rated investments, and that would typically be the central banks, sovereign wealth management funds, pension funds, and various types of fund managers. Also bank treasuries.
Very interesting. But today we're here to talk about gender equality. And I'm wondering, why has Commune Invest decided to, have a look at gender equality and kind of use it as one of the topics to focus on?
So if we take a step back and look at why is Commune Invest established and what is our purpose and vision, and this is effectively to provide financing for investments in Swedish local governments, as I said, targeting a sustainable development. When we're talking sustainable development, this is a broad-based measure, including both financially sound development, but which also incorporates measures to address environmental and social issues. In our history, we've essentially been focused on balance sheet financing for the local governments. 8 years ago, back in 2015, we started extending green loans to local governments to finance investment projects that specifically target green issues, climate adaptation, climate mitigation, and various other types of environmental issues. These loans are financed by issuing green bonds, and we've developed into becoming one of the largest green bond issuers in the Nordics, and have now been active in that market for nearly 6 years. In parallel, as you are aware, the sustainable finance market has developed, and there has been an increasing focus on also social issues, both amongst the so-called project owners, who effectively are active on the ground, as well as amongst institutional investors. So in response to a desire on the part of our owners for a financing product that could address social aspects, essentially along the same lines as our green financing program, we decided 2 years ago to start developing such a product in collaboration with our members and customers.
This product that you're talking about, do I understand correctly that it is social sustainability loans?
Exactly.
So could you elaborate a little bit about how these type of loans work?
So I think it's essential to have our sort of green history with us when we talk about this. As you are aware, the topic of additionality is ever present when you talk about use of proceeds products. In our case, this was very important part of this development process. How could we develop a social financing product that could actually provide additionality on the ground? Because we know financing is not an issue for Swedish local governments. They can generally get access to financing at very favorable terms. Providing the finance is not an additionality for us. So we had to think about other aspects of additionality when developing this product. Another key insight is that Swedish local governments are typically only allowed to finance physical infrastructure investments. Whilst we know that if you want to address social issues, the results are often an effect of having worked with people in various types of social interventions, which do not require physical investment. These were aspects that we took on board when developing the product, also taking into account that there is a great need among Swedish local governments for improved impact measurements, using impact evaluations to a greater degree and with greater precision. And with all these factors in mind, we have developed now what we call the social sustainability loans.
Like you said, additionality is one of the core pillars, perhaps, of sustainable finance. But for our listeners who maybe are not so familiar with the term, could you just quickly explain what additionality means in general?
So I would describe additionality as bringing something extra to the table. Does the product itself deliver something that would otherwise not have been delivered? Our solution to this is a loan product where we finance a physical investment, such as a school, a residential housing district, a preschool, perhaps a sports arena or something else, but where we have put in place very clear and precise requirements for a social intervention to take place in connection to that physical object. And these criteria include a requirement for having identified a target group in the population that you want to address with the social intervention, and a clear process for follow-up, measuring and evaluating the impacts of the intervention.
So you gave us a few examples of the types of projects that you finance through these loans. But coming back to the topic of gender equality, I was wondering if you could tell us about some specific projects that you finance that deal with gender equality.
The first example I would like to give is from the city of Vara, a municipality of 16,000, located in southwest Sweden, where we are financing a so-called family center. So a family center is a location where you bring together various types of services provided in the municipality, but which are sometimes provided by the municipality and sometimes provided by the region. And regions are responsible for healthcare in Sweden. So a family center is a co-location of maternal healthcare, child healthcare, open preschool, and various types of social services. And why is this needed? There exist some 200 family centers around Sweden, and particularly in areas where there's a high degree of immigration and many people that are born outside of Sweden. Gender equality is a pressing issue, and many women find themselves perhaps not so well integrated into Swedish society and Swedish culture. The family centers are sometimes specifically targeting women in these types of households and are trying to reach out to improve, perhaps assist in the family situation, particularly when there are young children in the households.
Yeah, I can imagine how by involving women in this situation, you can also, I guess, facilitate the integration of the whole family. And I think this is a great example of how gender equality equals equality in general, and how all the social issues and the social challenges that we're facing and the solutions to these challenges are all interrelated. So I think it's very interesting. Are there any other examples that you wanted to tell us about?
Yes, so one example that I would like to raise today is our financing in Botkyrka, an area southwest of Stockholm, which houses some of Sweden's most socially challenged living environments. These include, for instance, Botkyrka and Alby. The local public sector housing company, Botkyrka Byggen, has been engaged in socially responsible property management and development for a long time. And they introduced some years back, I think it was in 2007, a program that they call Women in Botkyrka, whereby they seek to address long-term unemployment, particularly amongst women of foreign origin living in this specific area. They had typically before subcontracted services such as cleaning and facility management to external parties. But with this program, they are now bringing this in-house, offering employment to women who are far away from the labor market and enabling them to get a full-time job with an appropriate salary, including also education and training in Swedish. And this program is now revolves around 45 women who are employed by Botkyrka Byggen, engaged in the cleaning and facility management of the houses, and they have had very, very good results here.
All right, what an interesting and great example. I think that only good things happen when women get more access to the labor market and also to more finance. So, Björn, you mentioned a little bit the kind of the additionality, first of all, of course, but also the impact. So I was wondering, do you use any specific indicators, or how exactly do you measure the impact that these projects have?
Given that the program is broad in scope and targets areas including residential housing, culture, sports, etc., it's obvious that the indicators will also be broad. But as I stated, we are requiring impact evaluation for the projects and impact evaluations that are related to the target group. So we specifically try to focus on impact indicators that are relevant to measure social progress or improvement for the target groups. So that is the type of perspective that we are adopting, and the impact indicators will differ between different types of projects, but they can include improved social health, improved mental health, improved unemployment ratios, decreases in criminality, improvements in customer satisfaction rates for the living environment, etc.
Right, and is this something that Commune Invest reports on, or is the reporting done by the project leaders?
The reporting is undertaken by the borrower. Commune Invest aggregates this reporting and intends to report on a portfolio basis in the future. And once we have issued our first social bond, perhaps even before that. But we are currently in a phase where we are building up the portfolio of loans with the ambition of issuing a social bond in the not too distant future.
Yeah, sounds like there are a lot of exciting developments coming up in the future for Commune Invest. So really looking forward to see how it unfolds. Thank you so much, Björn, for coming and talking to us today and for providing your very valuable insights. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having us.
Now it's time to talk to Camilla and Hanna from SEB Investment Management. Hi, both. Welcome to the podcast, and thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So you are both portfolio managers at SEB Investment Management. Could you tell us a little bit more about SEB IM and also what are your roles there? Camilla, maybe you'd like to start.
Sure. So investment management is the fund management company of SEB. So what we do is we manage the microfinance and impact opportunity funds. So we essentially make the investment decisions, what to invest in and not in those funds.
For our listeners who might not be aware, and I have to be honest, I didn't know so well what microfinance was before myself. So Hanna, could you maybe explain a little bit what is microfinance and what does impact funds mean?
So, impact fund, as a broad definition, means that we target a social and environmental return as well as a financial return. But coming back to microfinance, an easy way to put it is to say that it is offering people and entrepreneurs services and products, financial products, that they don't have access to in a formal system. And there are various reasons why they don't have access to that. It's often because they often live in rural areas. They're really hard to reach, really hard to get to. So it's really expensive to deal with these type of clients. And also they don't have much history, credit history. They don't have anything as collateral. Some countries you can't even own your own land. So that is, and many people may think that microfinance is only credit and loans, but it's not. It's so much broader. It's about having a good way to save, make affordable payments, maybe buy an insurance, and also education. So that is basically what microfinance is.
But do I understand correctly then that it is specific locations and areas that you work with, or is it kind of a global reach on these funds?
Yeah, it is a global reach, but our focus is emerging and frontier markets, as we call it.
And what are frontier markets?
So frontier markets is basically developing countries. So a bit less developed than emerging markets.
And these funds that you work with, is it everyone who can invest money into them, or is it only specific groups of people?
Well, unfortunately, only professional clients can invest today in these funds. So we mainly have institutional investors.
I know that you also have some considerations around gender equality when you work with these investments. So I'm wondering, why do you think that it's important to have considerations around gender equality when it comes to microfinance?
First of all, we represent half of the population. So it would really make sense that we also get half of the resources. When it comes to our funds, we call it impact funds. Including women as a real, objective is crucial. It's really important for us. And for us, gender equality, it comes down to freedom. Women's, ability to decide for themselves, participate, everywhere in the society and decide over their own bodies. And if you have a financial security, or if you have a job and can provide for yourself, I think that is easier. And also targeting women is, important because that effect will spill over to, for example, the kids. We know that when women have a work or have an income, they are more likely to send the children to school and give them more nutritious food. So it's important for so many different reasons.
Definitely. Like you said, Hanna, we are half of the population. So it's no wonder that if the quality of life of women increases, then the quality of life overall will increase as well. But looking at a more practical level, I would say, how exactly are you including these considerations around gender equality into your work?
Well, for us, it has really to do with selecting the good institutions. So we have some fantastic institutions that focus only on women, but also we should really remember that you cannot group all women in all these different countries that we invest in one bucket. So it really, depends on the education level you have, where you live, if you live in urban areas or more rural areas, etc., and what type of business you run. So we really focus on different type of institutions that offer different financial products and services to different clients. So, and we also know, for example, that women tend often to work in small trading businesses and in agriculture. So we have a lot of institutions that focus on these types of clients.
And do you have any kind of metrics on how or what impact you have on gender equality in the areas where you're investing, or how are you measuring and reporting the impact, I should say?
This is one of the challenges, to actually measure impact. But what we do is that we measure the number of female end borrowers. And then we know that half in our portfolios are female borrowers. And then we sort of rely a lot on research that has been done in this subject, and that proves the importance of access to finance for women as well. And also the fact that UN sees microfinance as an enabler for several of the SDGs.
And I'm really curious because it sounds like this work is so interesting, but I would love to hear some specific examples if you have any of, for example, projects that address gender equality that you have helped finance.
We recently invested in an institution in Jordan called Microfinance Fund for Women. And in Jordan, labor participation among women is very low, even in a regional context. And we think this is a fantastic institution, and they sort of have a 3-pillar approach to develop women. So the first one is to finance them, then to protect them, and to develop the women. So sort of a typical client is a woman that has an idea for starting a business, or that has an existing business but that needs to develop. So then they provide different kinds of loans depending on the business they run. They also offer sort of micro insurances, so health insurances, which has been really important during the last couple of years. So they pay if you have to go and stay in hospital. They also offer the possibility through an app to call, to have dialogue with medical doctors, etc. And they offer free medical days where you can check up everything from, breast cancer and other, to sort of increase the knowledge of how to live a healthy life. So that's their sort of protect. And they also offer micro savings. So women can start building up savings and earn some money on that. And then sort of lastly, this to develop. They have a lot of different trainings that they offer to women for their business, sort of how they can develop their business. So everything from financial literacy to actually sort of, do you need to develop your products? Do you need to develop the way you market your products? So different marketing channels, and they have even developed their own sort of digital platform where they can sell their products, both national and internationally. So I think this is it's a really interesting case because it's not only about financing, and that's what we see in a lot of institutions. It also comes with education.
Wow, I'm so impressed. I think this is so inspiring how finance and you'd think regular financial instruments can help support such amazing projects and also promote gender equality, which is such an important topic.
Yeah, and I mean, as we said in the beginning, we also manage another fund that's called the Impact Opportunity Fund, and there we have a much broader investment mandate. And some of the investment we have done there is to lend to entrepreneurs who sell affordable solar lanterns or solar home systems to people living in rural areas. And I mean, this type of product benefits, I mean, women and children, obviously, a lot. I mean, the impact we get from that type of investment is amazing. I mean, looking at both from a security issue, getting a flashlight, being able to spend, because people spend a lot of time outdoor, not being afraid of being run over by a car or assaulted. But also when it comes to health, I mean, indoor air environment could be terrible. There is so much, dirty fuels that is being used. So from a health perspective, for women and children who often spend a lot of time inside, is amazing. And I mean, kids is being able to study longer hours in better light. And the time you save for women, who's usually spending a lot of time walking, collecting firewood, charging your mobile phone. Now you can do it at home. So that's also one, I think, an investment that we really like in our portfolio that benefits women and children.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's also a great example of how interconnected all the different social issues are, and how by addressing social problem in one way, you can also address a different social problem in a different way. Hanna, Camilla, thank you so much for coming on the podcast and sharing your insights. I found them extremely valuable, and I'm sure our listeners will agree with me. So thank you so much for joining me today. And a big thank you, as always, to our listeners for tuning in. And make sure to like or subscribe to be notified when the next episode comes out. If you have any questions or suggestions for topics that you'd like us to cover in the future, then as always, please feel free to reach out to us at nextgenfin@seb.se. But for now, thank you and goodbye.